Okay, let's dive in. There's this bill in Florida, H9999. It's passed the legislature, and now it's waiting for Governor DeSantis.
Right. And the big headline is making gold and silver legal tender.
Right, actually.
Uh,
Which sounds, significant, but what does that actually mean for you listening? That's what we want to unpack today. We've looked at the bill itself, the context around it, and our goal here is really to cut through the jargon, understand what this might actually do.
yeah, it's interesting because we all sort of think we know what legal tender means.
Usually just dollars, right?
Right. But this bill is trying to, well, broaden that definition within Florida.
Yeah.
It's more than just saying gold and silver are valuable.
Okay, so let's get specific. What exactly is in this bill, H999? What does it do?
Well, first, it officially recognizes gold coin and silver coin as legal tender for paying debts, specifically.
But not just any old coin, presumably.
No, the definition's quite specific, actually, but also broad in the way. It covers rounds, bars, ingots, bullion coins, as long as they're at least 99.5% pure gold or silver, and crucially, stamped with their weight.
So purity and weight marked, that makes sense. It focuses on the metal's value, not collectability.
Precisely. And another big piece is that state agencies, even local governments, they'd be authorized to accept gold or silver.
For taxes and fees, things like that.
Exactly. Though the bill points towards electronic transfers for this,
Yeah.
which, makes practical sense today.
Yeah, you probably won't be lining up at the DMV with a sack of silver bars.
Probably not.
And here's something really interesting, I thought. They're getting rid of all state sales taxes on gold and silver coins that meet that legal tender definition.
That's a key change. It removes the old $500 threshold that used to exist.
So what's the thinking there? Why remove the tax completely?
Well, think about it. If gold and silver are meant to be money, taxing the exchange of dollars for gold, or vice versa, it's like taxing you for swapping a $10 bill for two $5 bills.
Ah, okay. So removing the tax treats it less like a commodity you're buying and selling and more like just money changing hands.
Exactly. It removes a major friction point if you actually want people to potentially use it as money, not just hoard it as an investment.
Which ties into that whole legal tender concept, doesn't it?
It does.
For most of us, like we said, legal tender means Federal Reserve notes, dollar bills.
Our current fiat system, yeah. Based on government decree, not backed by a physical commodity like gold.
But this bill seems to push Florida towards allowing gold and silver to function as money alongside dollars, providing an alternative.
That seems to be the core idea. The sources suggest supporters see this as laying the groundwork for competition.
Competition in the monetary system.
At the state and local level, yes. A way to challenge, or at least offer an alternative to, the Federal Reserve System's dominance.
And Florida isn't the first state to go down this road, is it? What about Utah?
Right, Utah was the pioneer, really. Back in 2011, they reestablished gold and silver as legal tender.
And what happened there? Did anything practical come out of it?
Well, it definitely spurred some innovation. Things like the Utah Gold Depository, which functions sort of like a gold bank.
Okay.
And maybe more famously, the Gold Back. Have you heard of those?
Vaguely.
Yeah.
They're like notes with actual gold in them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Voluntarily used notes, but they contain tiny, precisely measured amounts of physical gold. It makes gold usable for, small everyday transactions.
Like buying coffee, almost. That's fascinating. It shows how the legal recognition can spark real-world uses.
It does. It's a tangible example.
What about New Hampshire? I read they have a kind of thriving gold and silver scene, but they haven't actually made it legal tender. Is that right?
That's correct. New Hampshire's interesting because they show another path. They don't have the official legal tender status for bullion. But they don't have state sales taxes or other major tax barriers on precious metals.
Ah, so similar to what Florida is proposing with the tax repeal.
Exactly. And that lack of tax friction, combined with sort of public acceptance, has allowed a pretty active gold and silver economy to develop anyway.
So the takeaway there is maybe the tax part is almost as important or maybe even more important in practice than the official legal tender label.
It certainly suggests that removing those barriers is a huge factor in enabling precious metals to be used more like money. The legal tender status adds another layer, but the tax part is critical for day-to-day exchange.
Makes sense. Like that grocery clerk analogy, you don't pay tax swapping bills?
Precisely.
Okay, so beyond taxes and general use, the bill also mentions something called gold contract clauses. What's that about?
Ah, yes, that's another significant piece. It means the bill includes language, specifically recognizing the validity of contracts that call for payment in gold or silver.
So if you and I make a deal, write it down, saying payment must be in, say, 10 ounces of gold.
Then under this bill, if it becomes law, Florida courts should uphold that agreement. They couldn't just say, well, you have to accept the equivalent in Federal Reserve notes instead.
Okay, so it respects the agreement made between the parties.
Right. It enforces the specific terms of the contract, allowing people to choose gold or silver as the settlement medium if they both agree.
And the point of doing that would be protection against inflation, maybe?
That's often the motivation.
Yeah.
Think about a long-term contract, like a mortgage.
Okay.
If you have a 30-year mortgage specified only in dollars, and the dollar loses significant purchasing power over those 30 years.
The lender gets back less real value.
Exactly. But a gold clause contract might tie the payment to the value of a specific amount of gold. So if the dollar weakens, the number of dollars needed to satisfy the payment would go up, protecting the lender.
And if the dollar strengthens significantly relative to gold,
Then the borrower might need fewer dollars. It ties the debt's value to the gold itself, which proponents see as more stable over the long term than fiat currency, is a hedge.
it sounds like this is all tapping into a much older idea about money, linking back to the Constitution even.
It definitely is. Supporters often point to Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution.
Remind us what that says.
It says, among other things, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts.
So the argument is that states should only be recognizing gold and silver.
Historically, that was the framework. Obviously, today, Federal Reserve notes, authorized by Congress, are the primary legal tender we all use.
And the view behind bills like Florida's H999 is that the current Federal Reserve System, creating money not directly backed by gold or silver,
Is a deviation from that original constitutional principle. That's the perspective.
and the concern is that this leads to devaluation.
Yes, the argument is that creating money out of thin air, essentially, without a tangible backing, inherently debases the currency over time, erodes purchasing power.
And allows the government to borrow and spend more easily.
That's also part of the argument, that a system tied to physical metal imposes more discipline.
So why now? Why is Florida doing this in 2024? Is it symbolic or is there a bigger play?
Well, the sources we looked at frame this as a potential first step, a way for states to push back against the Federal Reserve System.
How would it push back?
The idea is, if states make it easier and legally sound for people to use gold and silver as money,
People might actually start doing it.
potentially, and if enough people choose to transact or save in gold and silver instead of dollars, it could, theoretically, start to chip away at the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money, sort of pulling the rug out from under the system bit by bit from the ground up.
That's a pretty ambitious idea. Individuals challenging the monetary system through their choices.
It is. It's based on the idea of competing currencies.
Okay, so what's the immediate next step for this bill, H999? What's the timeline?
It's all up to Governor DeSantis now. The clock is ticking. If the legislature was still in session when he got it, he has 7 days, not counting Sunday.
To sign, veto, or do nothing.
Correct. If they'd already adjourned, he gets 15 days.
And if he does nothing,
It becomes law automatically without his signature after the time runs out.
so we could see Florida officially recognizing gold and silver as legal tender very soon,
It's definitely possible.
which really makes it easier practically and legally for these metals to function more like everyday money there. It's a potential shift.
It absolutely is. And that brings us to a really interesting question for you, the listener, to consider.
What's that?
If Florida does this, and maybe other states follow Utah or New Hampshire or Florida's model, what could that mean down the road?
How might it change how we all think about money or
Oh, yeah.
use money?
Exactly. Could this kind of state-level action spark a much broader conversation, a rethinking of what legal tender means, and maybe even challenge the way our current financial system operates?
Definitely some food for thought there. It's worth considering those implications, maybe looking more into what's happened in Utah and New Hampshire. Florida's move here could be quite significant.